Evolution is often described as a straight line, a slow but steady march forward, from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced, from worse to better. We imagine life constantly improving, refining itself, fixing mistakes, upgrading weaknesses. But that idea is already misleading, because evolution doesn't move forward. It doesn't move backward either, and it certainly doesn't aim for perfection. Evolution reacts. It responds to pressure, to danger, to opportunity. And sometimes, when the pressure disappears, evolution does something unexpected. It stops. Most of us grow up with the same mental image. Dinosaurs turning into birds, fish crawling on a land, apes standing upright and becoming human. Change feels inevitable, like time itself forces life to transform. But that's not how natural selection works. There is no internal clock inside a species saying, it's time to become something new. If an organism survives long enough to reproduce, evolution considers the job done. No upgrade required. This is where a dangerous assumption slips in. We assume survival requires constant improvement, that standing still is the same as falling behind. But in nature, change is risky. Every mutation is a gamble. Every adaptation trades one advantage for another weakness. If an organism already fits its environment perfectly, changing can be more dangerous than staying the same. This idea makes us uncomfortable because we like progress. We believe improvement is always good. But evolution doesn't care about ambition. It doesn't reward intelligence, beauty, or complexity. It rewards one thing only: survival. There are environments on Earth that barely change at all. Deep lakes, isolated caves, the darkest parts of the ocean, places where temperature stays stable. Predators are predictable. Resources remain consistent for thousands, sometimes millions of years. In environments like these, innovation becomes unnecessary. An unnecessary change becomes a threat. So instead of evolving forward, some species do something far stranger. They pause. They hold on to juvenile traits. They keep outdated features. They refuse to follow the expected evolutionary path. Not because they are weak, but because they are already winning. Biologists have a term for this. They call these organisms living fossils. Not because they are old, but because their modern forms look almost identical to their ancient ancestors found in the fossil record. The name sounds poetic, but the reality behind it is deeply unsettling, because it suggests something we don't like to admit: that evolution can stall, that progress is optional, and that sometimes the best solution is no solution at all. One of the clearest examples of this defiance lives quietly beneath the surface of freshwater lakes. It looks unfinished, almost temporary, like a creature waiting for the rest of its development to arrive. But that moment never comes. This animal reaches adulthood without ever truly growing up. It keeps traits that other species abandon early in life. It refuses to complete the transformation we expect. And yet, it survives. Not for thousands of years, not for tens of thousands, but for millions. At first glance, it looks fragile. Soft body, external gills, a slow, drifting movement. It doesn't look like a survivor. It looks like a larva that forgot to become something else. But this appearance hides a remarkable truth. This animal didn't fail to evolve. It chose not to. Before we name it, we need to understand why this matters. Because this story isn't just about one strange creature. It challenges the way we think about evolution itself. If natural selection always pushes life forward, how do we explain species that stay the same? If complexity is an advantage, why do simple forms survive just as long? And if progress isn't guaranteed in nature, what does that say about progress anywhere else? In the next part, we'll we'll meet the animal that seems frozen in time, a species that never completed its transformation and never needed to. The animal we've been describing has a name: axolotl. It lives in freshwater lakes and canals, originally found in the high-altitude basin of central Mexico. At first glance, the axolotl looks unfinished. It has feathery external gills, a soft, elongated body, and limbs that seem almost too small for it. To most animals, these features are temporary. They belong to youth, to early development, to a phase meant to be outgrown. But the axolotl never outgrows them. In most amphibians, life follows a familiar pattern. They begin as aquatic larvae, then undergo metamorphosis. Gills disappear, lungs develop, the body reshapes itself for life on land. It's a dramatic transformation, a complete reorganization of anatomy and function. The axolotl refuses this step. It reaches sexual maturity while still looking like a larva. It can reproduce, it can survive, it can thrive, all without ever completing metamorphosis. This phenomenon has a name: neoteny. It means retaining juvenile traits into adulthood. In evolutionary terms, neoteny isn't a failure. It's a strategy. Instead of racing toward complexity, the axolotl locks itself into a stable, aquatic form that already works. And in its environment, that decision made perfect sense. The ancient lakes where axolotls evolved were cool, deep, and consistent. Water levels changed slowly. Predators were limited. Food was reliable. There was no urgent pressure to leave the water, no strong incentive to gamble on land. So evolution didn't force the change. It allowed the pause. This is where many people misunderstand evolution. They imagine it as an unstoppable force, pushing every species towards something better. But evolution doesn't push. It filters. It removes what doesn't work and leaves behind what does. If a juvenile form already survives efficiently, there's no rule saying it must grow up. In fact, metamorphosis is dangerous. It requires massive internal reorganization, hormonal cascades, vulnerable transitional stages. Many animals don't survive it. By skipping metamorphosis entirely, the axolotl avoids one of the riskiest moments in an amphibian's life. It trades potential versatility for stability and safety, and evolution accepts the trade. But neoteny isn't the axolotl's only oddity. It has another ability that seems almost impossible. If an axolotl loses a limb, it doesn't scar. It regenerates. Bone, muscle, nerve, skin, perfectly rebuilt. If part of its spinal cord is damaged, it repairs it. Even parts of its brain can regrow. This regenerative power isn't magic. It's biology. But biology operating under rules we don't fully understand. And it may be connected to the very trait that makes the axolotl seem immature. By staying in a juvenile-like state, its cells remain flexible, less specialized, more adaptable, capable of rebuilding instead of just healing. In humans, growing up means specialization. Cells commit, pads close, regeneration fades. In axolotls, growing up never fully happens, and that frozen development turns out to be an advantage. For millions of years, this strategy worked. The axolotl survived climate shifts, geological changes, the rise and fall of other species. It stayed where it was, and that was enough. But here's the twist. The axolotl didn't stop evolving entirely. It simply evolved in a different direction, not toward dramatic external change, but toward internal refinement, better regeneration, better aquatic efficiency, better survival in a narrow niche. Evolution didn't stall. It specialized quietly. This distinction matters, because when we say an animal refused to evolve, we don't mean it stood still. We mean it rejected the path we expected it to take. No land, no lungs first lifestyle, no dramatic metamorphosis, just persistence. And the axolotl is not alone. There are other creatures that follow the same logic, species that stayed almost identical, while the world around them transformed. Some are believed extinct, some are known only from fossils, until they were found alive. In the next part, we'll descend into a far darker environment, a place even more stable than ancient lakes, a place where change is slow, and survival favors those who never hurry. Far below the surface of the ocean, there is a world where time behaves differently. Sunlight never reaches it. Temperature barely changes. Seasons don't exist. The deep sea is one of the most stable environments on Earth. And in places like this, evolution slows down. Sometimes, almost to a halt. For decades, scientists believed that one particular fish had gone extinct over 65 million years ago. It was known only from fossils, ancient bones pressed into stone, dating back hundreds of millions of years. The fish belonged to a lineage, older than dinosaurs, older than most trees. It was considered a failure of evolution, a side branch that didn't survive, until it was found alive. In 1938, a living specimen was pulled from the ocean. It looked almost exactly like its fossil ancestors. Same body shape, same lobe fins, same primitive features. The discovery shocked the scientific world because it wasn't just a survivor. It was a reminder. This fish, the coelacanth, had not disappeared. It had simply retreated into a world where change was unnecessary. Deep underwater caves, cold, oxygen-poor environments, minimal competition. In that setting, innovation offered no advantage. Stability did. The coelacanth didn't fail to evolve. Like the axolotl, it found a version of itself that worked, and then it kept it. This pattern repeats across life on Earth. Horseshoe crabs, nautilus shells, certain jellyfish, lineages that appear frozen in time, not because they are weak, but because they are perfectly matched to environments that barely move. This reveals a truth we rarely talk about. Evolution does not reward speed. It rewards fit. If the world around you stays the same, the smartest move is to stay the same too. Change always comes with risk. A new trait can open doors, but can also close others. A mutation might improve survival, or it might break something that already worked. In stable environments, risk becomes unnecessary, and unnecessary risk is punished. This is why the idea of progress doesn't belong in evolutionary biology. There is no finish line, no final form, no guarantee that more complex means more successful. In fact, complexity can be a liability. It requires more energy, more coordination, more things that can go wrong. Simple systems break less often. Stable systems last longer. And organisms that resist change sometimes outlive those that chase it. This challenges a deeply human belief. We assume standing still is failure. That growth must always mean expansion, upgrading, becoming something else. But nature doesn't share that belief. Nature asks only one question: does this work? If the answer is yes, nothing else matters. The axolotl never grew up. The coelacanth never left the deep, and countless other organisms never took the next evolutionary step we expected them to take, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't need to. In the final part, we'll step back and look at the bigger picture, what these creatures tell us about evolution itself, and why refusing to evolve might be one of the most successful strategies life has ever discovered. When we look at life through the lens of evolution, we are tempted to tell a story of constant motion, a story where change is inevitable, where progress is mandatory. where staying the same is a sign of failure. But evolution tells a quieter, more unsettling story. A story where success doesn't always look like transformation. Sometimes it looks like refusal. The axolotl never left the water. The coelacanth never chased the surface. Horseshoe crabs never redesigned their bodies. And yet they survived. Not just briefly, not barely. They endured mass extinctions, climate shifts, the rise and collapse of entire ecosystems, while faster changing species appeared and disappeared around them. This forces us to confront a difficult truth. Evolution does not care about direction. It doesn't care if a species looks ancient or modern. It doesn't care if a body plan seems elegant or awkward. It doesn't care if a creature feels unfinished to our eyes. Evolution has no aesthetic sense. It asks only one question. Does this organism survive long enough to reproduce? If the answer is yes, nothing else matters. In popular culture, we often talk about evolution as if it were climbing a ladder. Lower rungs at the bottom, higher, better forms at the top. But there is no ladder. There is no top. There is only a branching tree, with countless paths that go sideways, loop back, or stop entirely. Some branches grow complex. Others remain simple. Some split endlessly. Others barely move at all. And none of them are more advanced than the others. The axolotl's refusal to metamorphose is not a flaw. It is a reminder that development itself is optional. Growth is not a requirement. Complexity is not a reward. If an organism finds a form that fits its environment perfectly, change becomes unnecessary. And unnecessary change is dangerous. This is where human intuition often fails us. We are a species obsessed with improvement. We upgrade tools. We replace systems. We believe stagnation is the same as decline. So we project that mindset onto nature. But nature doesn't upgrade. It adapts, or it doesn't. And sometimes not adapting is the adaptation. Think about how fragile, complex systems are. The more specialized something becomes, the more it depends on narrow conditions. A specific temperature range, a specific food source, a specific balance of hormones, structures, and behaviors. Complexity offers power, but it also creates vulnerability. Simple systems are harder to break. They require less energy. They tolerate change more easily. They survive disruptions better. In a stable environment, simplicity can be the strongest advantage of all. This explains why some of the most ancient lineages on Earth are still alive today. They didn't win by racing forward. They won by staying compatible with environments that barely changed, while other species adapted aggressively and sometimes over-adapted. These organisms remained flexible by remaining simple. There's a paradox here. Creatures we call primitive are often incredibly refined, not refined in appearance, but refined in efficiency. They waste nothing. They take few risks. They persist. Evolution didn't forget them. It tested them and found no reason to interfere. This challenges another comforting myth, that evolution always favors intelligence, or strength, or speed. It doesn't. There are countless brilliant, powerful, fast species. That vanished. And there are slow, strange, unimpressive creatures that outlive them all. Survival is not a contest of greatness. It is a test of adequacy. Being good enough, for long enough, is what wins. When we say an animal refused to evolve, what we really mean is this. It refused to gamble. It refused to abandon a working solution for an uncertain improvement. It chose persistence over ambition, and nature rewarded that choice. This idea unsettles us because it undermines a belief we hold very deeply. That progress is inevitable. That change is always beneficial. That standing still is a mistake. But evolution doesn't agree, and nature has had billions of years to test that assumption. If evolution teaches us anything, it is humility, the realization that complexity is not destiny, that improvement is not guaranteed, that success often looks quieter than we expect. Sometimes the most successful life forms on Earth are the ones that attract the least attention. They don't dominate headlines. They don't inspire myths. They don't look impressive. They simply remain. The axolotl still drifts through dark water, carrying traits that other species abandoned long ago. The coelacanth still moves slowly through deep caves, unchanged while the surface world transformed again and again. They are not relics. They are survivors, and their existence forces us to ask a final question. If evolution doesn't always move forward, if progress is optional, if refusing to change can be the smartest move, then what does advancement really mean? Not just in nature, but anywhere. Perhaps the lesson of these creatures is not about biology alone. Perhaps it is a reminder that growth without purpose is noise, that change without pressure is risk, and that sometimes the most powerful decision is knowing when not to evolve at all.